Hello, Dr. King Harms, and welcome to Everything End of Life. I kick off, as you know, by asking people a little bit about themselves, what they do, what they've done, and to give us a little bit about your story. So please feel free.
Yes, well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here, Jason. And I want to thank being in Great Britain for the hospice movement, which I'm just a huge fan. I benefited from that when my husband passed away, and I'm so glad that we have options now, which is fabulous. So my story basically is when I was born, um, my mother, believe it or not, there are some thalidomide babies here in Minnesota, in the United States. She happened to be going traveling to Cincinnati, Ohio, where they were testing it, and she was pregnant with me. So when I was born, I was missing some fingers due to thalidomide, and my mother was bipolar, and but wonderful. She was the best mother ever. She was fractured in many ways, but she was absolutely the best mother ever. But I lost her when I was 17 to suicide, and that was a very, very hard thing to do. So that was my first big round of experience with the death of a loved one. Was that when my mother died?
I mean, that's
Fast.
so hard, isn't it? I mean, at that age, and that must have been such an explosion in your mind of why? What
Oh,
the heck?
yes, yes. And one of the things too at that time, which has changed dramatically, she was Catholic, and at that time they would not give her a funeral. So, I remember this going to a viewing in this room that was just full of shame. I mean, it was just a horrible, horrible thing. So that happened when I was young. But then, I went to school. I found this wonderful guy named Jim Harms who wanted to be a dentist. So I figured, hey, if I maybe became a dentist, he would marry me because this was like back in the 70s. That's what you did in the 70s. But, I'm missing some fingers. So it's like I only have 7 fingers. So it's like, what the heck? Do you think there'd be some, would they even let me in dental school with 7 fingers? Long story short, I was able to find an advisor that got me in contact with someone at the dental school. And they said, well, one hand goes to dental school, the other hand holds a mirror. So yes, you can go to dental school. And my plan worked. I got the guy.
Hey,
I got the guy. We went to dental school. We became dentists. I had a great career in dentistry. We had a nice, wonderful small practice. I was the first woman president of the Minnesota Dental Association. I was a national spokesperson for the American Dental Association. So I had this fabulous career, and life was going along wonderfully for our family. We had 3 children, 3 beautiful children. And then in 2007, my brother passed away from a heart attack. 2 months later, my husband was diagnosed with liver cancer. He got a liver transplant 6 months later. But then 6 months after that, our beautiful, beautiful, beautiful son, Eric, took his own life. He was at Columbia University. He was this brilliant, beautiful, loving, kind, caring, golden boy, just brilliant. And he was recruited by Columbia University. He was in the engineering program, but he was also in the jazz program. He was a jazz pianist. And as you know, jazz pianists are very impulsive. That's what makes them so good at jazz piano, right?
yeah.
So the jazz pianist. And he had the best first semester ever. He was elected to student government. He was participating in the plays with the students from Barnard. There was girls over at Barnard. He was having a great time doing that. He was playing in the jazz program, and he was on the dean's list in engineering. So, like, how can you top that? And he came home and was on top of the world, just on top of the world. Never seen him so happy after his first semester.
Okay.
And he went back, and 2 weeks later, his girlfriend broke up with him, which is a normal part of life. That's what happens, right? But
Yeah.
that impulsive 19-year-old brain, he took his life within 45 minutes of the breakup.
Oh, that is hard. That's so hard. I mean,
Yes,
that is seriously impulsive, but I mean,
very impulsive. If he had had a moment to think, but anyway,
that must have been so devastating to have that
oh,
whole life swept away from you, just without
oh
any chance to say anything goodbye or, yeah.
no, no warning whatsoever to us. And we were completely devastated. My 2 daughters, my husband, and I were just, you can't even describe it. Your whole life has exploded. And I
Oh,
thought I'd been through a difficult time, but there's nothing like this. So, but what I found out though, which was wonderful about how we as a society are progressing, is that Eric, my family were Baptist, my family's Baptist, and my son Eric went to a Catholic boys' school, but he wasn't there anymore. He was at Columbia University. He was away from that. But unlike my mother, when Eric had like this huge thousands of people at his funeral. He had the entire all boys Catholic military school. He had hundreds of those students. They bused the kids on a school day from a school he no longer attended because he had moved on. They bused the kids to his funeral. Our church showed up for his funeral. All the pastors talked, as he used to sing in the choir at our funeral. All the pastors talked with him and about suicide at the funeral. And I'll never forget the most amazing gift I got was as we were taking his casket down the aisle, all those boys, these beautiful, beautiful young boys, high school boys, lined up in their dress uniforms and I get goosebumps even talking about saluted his casket as we were bringing this along, and then comparing that to my mother's funeral. The Catholics were supportive, and they couldn't be more supportive. The Baptists were supportive. They couldn't be more supportive. So I'm just so grateful that we have we're progressing to the point where we support people with mental illness. And we didn't even know he had mental illness. We didn't know that he would be this impulsive. It was a big surprise. So I'm able to, when we talk about death and dying, I'm able to kind of compare the two from 35, difference in 35 years.
I mean,
But
in a little while, we'll come on to the whole idea of legacy and things, but
yes,
because you couldn't say goodbye, I mean, that must have been in and of itself legacy for
yeah,
you, for
yes,
something to hold on to that he
yeah.
was so loved,
He was loved. He was loved. And they even had a big ceremony in Columbia. They planted a tree. They made him an honorary member of the class, the graduating class of 2012. Because he was a loving, kind, caring, compassionate young man. He was just, wonderful. Of course, I'm his mother, but still, he really was. He was considered that way by everyone.
Yeah.
And so an important thing that happened to me after that, when we talk about death and dying and trying to grieve and trying to just get your life back after a catastrophic loss, I had this very important thing said to me, and that was when we're in that zombie phase. Anyone that's had a catastrophic loss, you go through the zombie phase where you're like, you kind of try to smile on the outside, and on the inside, you're dead. You
Yes.
just
Yeah.
can't hardly move. So we had to go back to work, which was good because otherwise we'd be a zombie at home. And which is hard as a dentist because you have to, who wants a dentist who's grieving, right? When you want that drill being focused on your tooth, right? So you have to go back and try to make that work.
Yeah,
So
these are my problems. You've got your problems. These are all my problems.
we got to get that. We got to be focused on that.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we were back at work and still zombie-like. And I was walking out of the office one day, and my husband was talking to his cousin, and they were involved in a very active conversation. And as I walked toward them, the cousin came up to me, wagging his finger in my face. And I'm a grieving mother, so people were kind of pretty nice to me at that time,
Yeah.
wagging his finger in my face, said, "Don't you ever let your remaining children feel that they are not enough. Don't you ever do that to them." And I was like, what the heck? What are you? Oh, what? And I realized he had given me an amazing gift. He had lost his brother at about 19, and he felt that he lost his parents too.
Right.
His parents just couldn't cope with the grief. They weren't processing it to a point where they could parent their two remaining children.
So this must have given a bit of an epiphany to you at the time.
Yes, it was like a lightning strike.
Yeah.
Because it was like, whoa, my grief is just not my grief. My grief is the grief of my children. My husband had just had a liver transplant, right? So he's recovering physically as well. And I love my husband. I love my children. And so as a gift of love to them, I just became determined that I am going to fight my way out of this grief pit. I'm going to do everything I can. I am not going to stay here forever. And I wish I could say that, right away I was happy again. Of course not. It took years, but I was fighting every step of the way. And the message I'd love to give to the people that are listening is that you have to fight your way out of that grief pit. If you don't fight, you just stay down there. I mean, I was almost buying curtains. It was like, okay, I'm going to live here the rest of my life. I'm never going to be happy. because that's
Yeah,
where you
yeah.
go. That's where you go when you have something like that's where you
You're
go. How to
hard. Yeah.
survive. So you got to fight and kick and scrape and then you're going to go up and then you're going to fall back down again because you'll get another, wave of grief. But you just have to fight and fight and fight and continue to fight. And it's worth it because I was able to get out of the grief pit, and it's so much better out here. It's so much better.
Hello, welcome back out to the real world. Yeah.
Exactly. It's so much better when you can live in joy. It's so
Yeah.
much better when you can give love fully and not be hampered by that grief shroud, right, that's covering you. So I
Well,
really
let me
like
just
to
ask you
encourage
another
it.
question here. So all
Yeah.
through that journey that you went, which took
Yes.
years,
Yeah.
on the outside, what would people have seen?
For the first, okay, I don't really remember the first year. I have to tell you that was,
Yeah.
um, they would have seen someone that looked like I was coping very well.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
smiling, and I was coping well. And I think for me, and everybody's different. I think that's the other thing. Some people can get out faster. Some people can never get out. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
different for everybody, and you have to respect that. They saw someone that looked as if they were coping well. When my children were around, I really focused on them.
Yeah.
I took that those words rang in my ears every day. I did my best to help my husband who was suffering physically and emotionally, and also I got help. I suffer from depression, obviously, suicide mother, suicide son, like I'm in the middle.
Right.
I got help. I suffer from depression and I'll be treated the rest of my life. And thank the Lord that we have treatment because it helped me to get out of the pit. My husband, on the other hand, did not get treatment because used to call him my stubborn Norwegian because, they're tough.
Okay.
Norwegian
Yeah.
farm boy, they're tough.
Yeah.
They don't need help. They can do it all on their own. And what happened to him is his heart that checked out great before his transplant. Within a year, he was getting heart surgery. His heart just fell apart and literally fell apart. And I really believe that was because he could not admit that he was suffering from depression and get treatment because he felt he could do it himself.
The
And so,
effect of the mind on the body, and the emotions and everything is well documented as being such a strong, huge link, isn't
yeah,
it? You know.
yes, yes. And so that's kind of how I coped. And I think it took me maybe 3 to 4 years to kind of be kind of normal on the inside. I wouldn't say I was like joyful yet. I
No.
was okay. And I was, I was pretty normal. I was pretty normal. And then, after about 10 years, I've done a lot of things. Another thing that happened is 1 year after Eric died, 1 year, I was having a lot of pain, and we dentists have a lot of back pain and neck pain, so that's not unusual. And I went over to the Mayo Clinic because I was really, really having a hard time with my neck. As it turned out, I had a problem with my neck, the compression in my neck, that affected, of all places, it could have affected any place else in my body. It affected my drilling fingers. And I only had one good hand, right? I had one good hand, and
Yes.
wouldn't you know that that's a place that turned compression.
Such a
So
slap in the face, isn't it?
heck? What the heck? And the doctor said, "Okay, you're done." So I was like the breadwinner because my husband
Yeah.
was practicing part-time. I was a breadwinner. I was full-time, and now I'm done. And my job gave me something to go to every day that I was good at, and it gave me fulfillment. And now I can't even have my job anymore.
But
So
also an income. That must have been,
an income,
yeah,
yes, I
that must
was.
be really hard. Jings.
It was the pits. It really was. And I have wonderful pastors. I was talking to my pastor, and he said, as I was like crying on the phone, like, no, no. And he said, "Well, Kim, let's just think about it. It's not the worst thing that's happened to you." It was like, you know what? I guess, hello, I guess you're right. If that's,
Yeah,
yeah, that's
yeah,
true.
yeah.
So I had to kind of get over that. But what it did is it gave me time on my hands, right? So I don't have a job. So I became a grief counselor, thinking that was going to be a really good thing. And it was very helpful. And during my time as I was studying for that, I learned a lot about grief. And I learned about tasks of mourning. There's something called Warden's Tasks of Mourning. When I love tasks because it gives you something to hold on to, right? You got a task to do. It's not like a stage. We all know the Kubler-Ross stages agree with, which are great, but there's stages. It's kind of like you go through them, but a task. I mean, I could get my hands around a task. And the first task was acceptance, and that takes a while. The second task was processing the grief. We have to process it. I wished I could wake up like Rip Van Winkle, right? And 20 years, go to sleep for 20 years, wake up and I'm fine, right? But you can't. You have to process it. So you have to process the grief. That's a hard part. And then you have to accept your new reality. This is my new life. And then you have to find a lasting, enduring place for the person that you loved. And that's what I would help me a lot. We were able to, through a lot of different circumstances, arrange to have memorial libraries in Rwanda for Eric. And we now have 65 memorial libraries, Eric Harm's memorial libraries all over Rwanda. He loved books. He was a Latin scholar. He loved, so this would be such a fitting legacy for my son. And then 4 years ago, my husband died of heart failure. And so now we have some libraries for him too. So I'm able to kind of have that place for them in Rwanda. And then I learned that I worked with some widows groups and I wrote a couple of widows devotionals to help them get through all the process of grief after you die. You have an identity crisis, you have loneliness, all that stuff you have. So I've learned to do that as well. So that has helped me in my grief. And then I wrote after my husband died, and it was like, now wait a minute, because I was taking care of him for all that time. So now what do I do now? Now now I'm a widow. What the heck? Which, by the way, 75% of women become widows. So that's hello. It's not a good statistic.
Yeah, we don't last too long. We're not great.
You guys don't last. You guys are dropping. And I'm a widow. So, and now I'm alone. I've never been, I got married at 19. We were married for 44 years. Now I'm alone and I'm a widow. What the heck do I do now? So I worked with the widows groups and that was very helpful. And then I thought, we don't know nobody gives us a workbook for what we do this part of our lives. Like I'm between menopause and death. That's where I'm at right now. And what do we do during this time? We usually plan for things. We plan for retirement. We plan for all these other things that we do. And now what do I plan for now? And so I thought, well, maybe I need to plan for the time when I go, right? Because I'm going to go. And I wanted to make sure that my children and my grandchildren have the softest landing when I go. And that's why I wrote the book. Build a legacy, come to terms with death and dying. I became a death doula. And then here's all the things we need to do, including forgive, reconcile. I have templates for letters. I have all the things we just need to do so that when I die, so instead of when I die, my children are mourning and then they have to come here and like search through all my drawers to find my papers and all that stuff. And then, then all the morning they're going to think, well, why didn't mom prepare for me? There's a little anger there sometimes when they do that. So instead of that now, Jason, I've got this whole thing planned. So instead of that, now when I die, they'll be mourning. And now they're going to get their 3-ring legacy binder with everything they need. It's got my healthcare directive for before I die. It's got my will or where the will is located. It has all of my passwords. It's got all the numbers that they need. It has my title to my car. It's got my birth certificate. It's got my social security number. It's got all the real estate things they need, all in one spot. So what they're going to do then now is they're going to open that book and say, yay, mom really loved us. She put all this together for us. But then there's a bonus. There's an extra bonus. And that is they're going to have legacy love letters. So they're going to go through, mom is so great. She left this for us. And then they're going to find Valentines to them. Every one of my family members has a Valentine, has a dear, daughter. I'm so proud to be your mother. Thank you for giving me such a wonderful life. That tells them, I know I'm going to die, and I want you to know you go on and live a happy life without me. So that's a point of the book, is that how do we prepare them to have a soft landing after we go? So, that's the story.
It's an amazing thing, because what we were saying just before we got into this into the podcast was this is something. It's an area that we don't really think about a lot, which is if we have time, we can, get these things prepared. And certainly when I've been into some patients in the last 2-3 weeks, their relatives are saying they're non-communicative and we don't know where the passwords are.
Right.
We can't access the bank account because we don't know anything about that. And so to have that all laid out for you, and your preferences. We do have here in England, we've got a thing starting up called My Choices. And it's been going for a little while now. And it's trying to get people to have that conversation about what your choices are for when you die. Now, that's the after bit, isn't it? That's I'm going to die and now I want to be shot into space with my cats and dogs and everything. whatever you want to have done.
I know.
That's fine. But the you bit, what you've left behind, that is really special because I know when my mother died, uh, we've got a hamper full of photographs, but which is great, but they're photographs with lots of people. I have not got a clue who they are. So if I had photographs these days, I write on the back the date, what was going on in that photograph and all that, and then I keep that for the kids. So this book that you've written, I think it's probably one of those really important books that everybody needs to have, yeah, or a version thereof. Um, I'm gonna ask you though. I'm gonna just come away from the book just for a sec, and I just want to wind back there to Rwanda. Now, what took you to? Because you skipped over that really deftly, I thought. What took you to Rwanda?
Well, I'm so glad you asked because this is my favorite part.
Okay.
Okay, when I died, when my son died, I was in that zombie stage and I was just suffocating. That's what happens. And I think there was some divine intervention going on here because I suddenly ran into people from Rwanda. Now, I had never come across anyone from Rwanda my entire life, ever. And when the genocide happened, I was raising my kids and I thought, oh, that's so horrible, how terrible. And let's go and get the diaper change. That's kind of where I was in my life. So all of a sudden, after he died, I started meeting people from Rwanda. I was at a prayer breakfast once, and I sat next to a woman, and she was from Rwanda, and she was telling me about her family that she lost. She lost her two daughters and her husband. They were all killed. And she told me about them. And then she said, but my new family, and I thought, what? Your new family? She has what the Rwandans have done, and they're an amazing culture. What they have done is they've adopted the orphans. So she lost her husband. So
Wow.
she adopted orphans, and she married a man who was, I think, was perhaps was widowed. I can't remember for sure.
Yeah.
But she married a man, adopted orphans, and now she has a new family, and she is raising the new family. And I thought, what? And then
Incredible, isn't it?
she had a joyful demeanor, and I was
Yeah.
going, how can you, how can you be joyful? I mean, I was working towards it, but I never really saw any people out there, right? How can you be
Yeah.
joyful after losing your entire, not just her family, her children and her husband, her entire family was wiped out. And then after that, I got a friend who gave me the book Left to Tell by Immaculée Ilibigazi. It was a New York Times bestseller years ago. And it's a book about how she survived in a bathroom with 8 other girls while the killers were all around searching for them. It was a miraculous story. And I thought, wow, Rwanda is kind of hitting me, right? And then I went to lunch with a dear, dear friend of mine who happened to be on the board of Books for Africa, which is based here in Minneapolis. And she said, Kim, I was in Rwanda years ago and before the genocide, and I've always wanted to bring them a library because that's what Books for Africa does. Why don't
Okay.
we do
Yeah.
one in memory of Eric? And it was like, oh my gosh, the light bulbs came on. So we raised funds for the first container to go, and we got 7 libraries. And of course, I'm a dentist, so I developed a relationship with the dental school, and we had law libraries to the law schools because they have a relationship where they have a whole law library that was developed by Kofi Annan and Walter Mondale. Brand new books donated by Thomson Reuters, which is a book publishing company, specifically designed for emerging democracies in Africa.
Oh, right. Okay.
We
I
were
was
able
going
to,
to ask about that. How on earth do you choose what books should be in such a new environment, a new library in a different culture?
yes,
That must be such a
that was,
job.
well, as divine intervention would have it, Eric died in 2009. And in 2009, Rwanda switched its language of education to English.
Yeah.
So they were desperate for books. And so uh, what Books for Africa does, it's a biggest shipper of donated books to Africa. They ship books to every single country. They have every libraries in every country. And what they do is you pick the libraries that you want, the library, the project, and then they send out an order form. And they have a great big warehouse where people donate books and slightly used. They don't take really old books or new books, and no encyclopedias, and it has to be up to date because the world changes. Look at how borders change, right? So so they order the books that they want. Now they can't order specific titles, but they order the genre that they want. And many of the schools order, many of the schools we brought, math books, science books. We have an all-girls school that we sent. They like many of them come here to the U.S. for education. So we had college entrance exam books that we got from a publisher. Merck, the Merck company that does Merck manuals, which is like a little almost medical Bible. We're
Right.
able to send thousands of Merck manuals to Rwanda for the dentists and the physicians. Because we started with the dentist, and the physician said, "Hey, what about us?" So we sent them to the physicians and the nurses. So
Yeah.
they have, and we now have
That's
65.
going to spread, isn't it? It's just going to spread,
It just spreads, and we
That's
have
right.
65 libraries now, but more. So the libraries, we were able to develop those libraries in Eric's name and now in my husband's name. But what they did for me was they were the best grief counselors ever, because when I went there and we told them I lost my son and this is in honor of my son, I was just surrounded by people. I mean, all of these women, they're mostly women because the men kind of there's a shortage of men there because they were killed off or put in jail for a long time.
Yeah.
So the women were just surrounded me with love, and I could see on their faces. And I started, it was I think 16 years after the genocide, which is where I am now with my son's loss. I could see on their faces that they had found joy. They were able to find joy. And the Hutu women and the Tutsi women worked together in cooperatives. What? So
Yes.
they learned what they found, what they decided was that they did not want their children growing up in an environment like that. So the only way they could do that is that they learned to forgive and to reconcile and to rebuild their country based on those uh, principles.
Yeah.
And when I went there the first time, it was really kind of funny because I went there the first time, and the prisoners were still in jail for the genocide. Most of them went there for 20 years. So they were so there would be all these work details because they go and they farm their own food, right? So you'd be driving along in the country and you'd see this long detail with maybe 30 prisoners in pink jumpsuits walking along, and one guard in the front, one guard in the back with a rifle. And the prisoners all had sickles and hoes and machetes and all of the tools that were used in the genocide to kill, right? And there might have been 30 of them. And there were two guards. And I was talking to my guy and I said, wait a minute, this is a dangerous situation. They could turn on those guards in a minute. And he looked at me, and this is so typical of the Rwandan mentality that I love. He said, well, Kim, they're not going to do that. Where would they go? If they tried to escape, their families would send them back to jail because they have to work through their sentence. And I said,
Uh, uh,
whoa, whoa,
yeah.
this is an amazing culture. So they did so much for me. I mean, when we take a look at the library situation, they saved me in so many ways by, first of all, giving me a legacy for my son,
Yeah.
but second of all, giving me the understanding that no matter what happens to you, no matter what, you can find joy again. May
Yeah.
not seem like that, but you can find joy again. And their culture, what a record of forgiveness.
I've got to bring that and reflect that. I mean, that is such an amazing, as you say, cultural thing. Because as you probably know, over here we have Northern Ireland, and it's had its troubles over the years. And there's been the Catholics and the Protestants, and there's been attempts at reconciliation, but culturally, quite often they're miles apart, and they still have separate schools in many areas. And there is a kind of big effort to change that. But what a great lesson to learn from the Rwandans is that, if you want to integrate, actually do that, properly with family. That's an amazing lesson to learn. So
And I'm sorry, one thing I just wanted to say is that when it comes to religion in Rwanda, they are respectful of all religions. The religious group leaders work together. It's
yeah,
mostly a Christian country, but there are Muslims there, and then there's some of the Batwa, the indigenous peoples that were there. But they work together with all religions, and they accept all religions. They accept their differences. And I mean, we could learn. I mean, I would like to send all of our politicians to Rwanda here in the United States.
oh
We're
yeah,
coming along, come on. You
yeah,
know, they learn that. So
I mean,
You're right.
I'm a great believer in keeping religion well out of politics. In fact, they should be, well, they are diametrically opposed, really. So, it's I find it amazing to have a vicar or a priest as a politician, and yet in some countries, that's exactly what you've got. So that's quite peculiar. So okay, let's just come back because so you've written this book, and and how is that going? How is that? How are you getting that out there to people? I mean, there must be obviously you come on podcasts like myself, but I think you probably won some competitions or two. Would that be correct to say?
It did win. It was my favorite was the Pacific Book Awards. It was the inspirational book of the year for 2024. So
Wow.
I
Wow.
was really excited about that, and it did won a lot of competitions. That's kind of and I am not, I don't have it's a hybrid publisher, so it's kind of self-published. So I don't really know how to. I mean, I'm a dentist. I don't know how to sell books, right? This is my
No, I'm
thing.
with you.
What
Absolutely.
the
I've done a book and trying to do the self-publishing thing. I haven't got time. I've got all these kids, so mate. So I'm so impressed with how you've done, But it's
yeah,
what to be able to put out there. That is one that people need to read,
yes,
So
yes.
yeah. So what's the next step? I mean, so you've got this grief counseling. You're published author. You're out there with libraries across Rwanda. So which other part of the world are you about to overtake or take over?
Well, I'm a grandma, so I got six grandkids. And but as a grandma, what I find out is at this time of life, especially as a widow and a widow grandma, is that you can't let your identity become just one thing. You have to kind of spread out. Now I have grandchildren, and the oldest ones are about 12. They're 12 years old, and they're 12 going on 20. You know how that goes when they're in middle school now. So they're older, and I realize that as they get older, they don't really need their nana anymore. I'm not having to babysit, and
Yeah.
so you kind of have to like get your life focused on a lot of things. But my first priority are these little pumpkins, those little grandchildren. I just love them so much I can hardly stand it. And then what I'm doing is I really have this a mission, and I think I'm somebody that has to kind of be on a mission. I kind of have to
I
have like
get that impression. Yeah. Yeah.
kind of that's my thing, right? And as long as my brain is still kind of working, because when you get older, the words kind of you lose some of them in your head. As long as it's still working, and I was a speaker in dentistry. I used to speak all over the world in dentistry. I'm changing my speaking. I'm kind of getting out of the dental part. Although I did it on grief and and that kind of thing. So and conflict management, which is very closely related. So now I have this desire to help all of us. Now, I know I'm in my fourth quarter of life because I can do the math, but either you're in the fourth
You
quarter of
are
your life,
never in that. Really?
and I'm 68. So,
No.
oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh
You've got
yeah,
a
oh yeah.
listener who really does not look 68. Just
Thank you, but yeah, my joints are 68 years old. Let me tell you. So I just got my new hip. I'm in that stage. So I'm 68, and I see all of the people around me that are in the fourth quarter of life and know it. Now, remember, you're either know you're in the fourth quarter of your life because you can do math, or you don't know because who knows? The death comes unexpectedly. I just lost a
Yeah.
54-year-old niece, so everybody needs to prepare for this. But the fourth quarter people know they have to prepare. So I'm going around now. I was just in an assisted living center yesterday helping people get focused on the soft landing for their children and their grandchildren and helping them write,
Right.
especially the letters. That's the part that's closest to my heart. You got to get the other stuff done too. So I have all that in my book. I have a list of everything that needs to be done.
Yeah.
But the part that's closest to my heart is that after death communication that says, I was the luckiest grandma in the whole world to have you as my grandchild. You contributed so much to my life, and give them that last Valentine, and when you look at the St. Valentine story, he's St. Valentine left, whether it's tradition or not, but the story is that he left a letter to his true love that was delivered after he died. So that's kind of the story of the Valentine. So it's kind of like leaving a Valentine to your children and grandchildren. And my thinking of going through that book and all of a sudden like, oh my gosh, Valentine's, just being able to create that experience after I die.
Yeah.
That's what I want to help people do, because I think we need to leave that next generation stronger and more resilient
Emotionally as well as anything else.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. And I don't know about Great Britain, but here in the US, we baby boomers kind of spoiled our kids a little bit. We kind of gave them, we were trying so hard to give them an easy life that sometimes they have a little trouble with, with
Well,
resilience.
yeah.
So we want to build resilience up. We want to build resilience up in our children and our grandchildren. And I think having them have a healthy attitude about death is one way we can do that.
Well, do you know what? I think that's an amazing story to tell and to be living at the moment, which is lovely. And you obviously, have not let these moments of grief, years of grief, really dampen you down. But you're just such an ebullient person. It's lovely to see that you're out there and doing it for everybody else. And it's such a good message to put across, without a doubt, is to prepare everybody else for when we go. Because, I personally, I'll tell you a very short story is about a year ago, I was just about to go out in the evening. I'll get a bit personal here. And my wife went down the road to this dinner party that was going on. And so I'm just going to go to the loo. And a dreadful thing happened. I discovered blood in my urine and in my other end as well. And I just stood there, having done end of life care for people for the last 4 years, and thought, right, this might be a journey. It might be a short one. It might be a long one. But I kind of there and then somehow reconciled that the end was coming. And then when I saw my doctor a couple of days later, he said, "Have you been drinking beetroot juice?" And I went, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, what an idiot. And so, I've done all my reconciliation for no particular reason whatsoever. So I was really so thank God for that. So that's an interesting thing. So, but lots of things go through your mind is, how do I prepare? How do I prepare my friends and family? So, and there's a name for it too. It's called Beturia. Who knew? Um, so, listen, I want to thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. It's been really interesting. And if I ever win the lottery, I shall pop myself out to Rwanda, check out the libraries, and maybe donate a few of our children's books, because I write kids' books as well. And so I'll get round to you some other time about that. But so, yeah, thank you once again, and very best of luck with the next quarter, possibly even next 2 quarters. Who can tell?
Well, I don't know. My clock is ticking.
Yeah, well, I know that feeling. I know that feeling. Thank you very much, Dr. Kim Harms.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jason. This has been so much fun.
It's been good. Right. Thank you and goodbye.